On the surface, the life of 35-year-old Emma Walters was one that most people would envy. A loving husband, 2 adorable children, and a beautiful home in the upscale neighborhood of Woodbridge, Virginia. Emma had married her college sweetheart, Mark Walters, a successful attorney, and together they built a life that seemed perfect in every way. Emma was the picture-perfect wife and mother, always seen volunteering at the kids' school events and hosting immaculate dinner parties for friends and neighbors. To everyone around her, she seemed content, even blissful. But behind her warm smile and graceful demeanor, Emma was harboring a secret that would soon turn her idyllic world upside down. It all began innocuously enough. One day, while browsing social media, Emma stumbled upon a message from a name she hadn't seen in nearly 15 years, Jason Collins, her high school boyfriend. They had been each other's first loves, but life had taken them on different paths after graduation. Jason moved away for college, and they eventually lost touch. Curiosity got the better of Emma, and she responded to his message. What started as a friendly catch-up soon turned into regular chats. Jason, now a fitness trainer running his own gym in a nearby town, was just as charming and attractive as Emma remembered. Their conversations grew more personal, rekindling feelings Emma thought she had long buried. Emma was caught off guard by the intensity of her emotions. Mark had been a devoted husband, but their marriage had grown stale over the years. His demanding job left little time for intimacy or affection, and Emma felt more like a part of his daily routine than the love of his life. She missed the passion and excitement that she once felt with Jason, and this longing drove her to continue her secret conversations. Within a few weeks, the messages turned flirtatious, then explicitly intimate. Emma knew she was playing with fire, but she couldn't resist the thrill of reconnecting with Jason. They arranged to meet in person under the guise of a casual coffee, both telling themselves it was just a harmless reunion. The first meeting was awkward, but filled with unspoken electricity. They reminisced about their past, shared laughs, and exchanged meaningful glances. After an hour, they said their goodbyes, but as Emma drove home, she realized her heart was pounding in a way it hadn't in years. She felt alive, exhilarated, and terrified all at once. What started as a single coffee date quickly evolved into something much more dangerous. Emma and Jason began meeting regularly in secret, usually at a small, secluded hotel halfway between their towns. Their affair was intense, fueled by the excitement of the forbidden. For the first time in a long while, Emma felt wanted, desired, and free from the mundane routine of her daily life. But as the months passed, the affair that once seemed thrilling began to feel suffocating. Jason wanted more. He wanted Emma to leave Mark and start a new life with him. He insisted that they belonged together and that their love was worth any sacrifice. Emma, torn between her family and her rekindled passion, felt trapped. She had never intended to destroy her family, and the thought of her children suffering because of her actions filled her with guilt and fear. One cold December evening, after yet another secret meeting, Jason confronted Emma. "How long are we going to keep doing this, Emma? Hiding? Sneaking around? You said you love me, but you're still with him," he said, his voice laced with frustration. Emma looked away, tears welling up in her eyes. "I do love you, Jason, but I can't just leave Mark. I have a family, and I can't hurt them like this." Jason's face hardened. "So you're just going to keep using me then? Is that it? I'm just your little secret on the side?" "No, it's not like that," Emma whispered. But even to her own ears, it sounded weak. She tried to reach for his hand, but he pulled away. "Then prove it," Jason demanded. "Leave him, be with me, or end this once and for all." Emma was silent, her mind racing. She couldn't bear to let Jason go, but the thought of leaving her children shattered her heart. She knew she couldn't continue like this, living a lie torn between two worlds. But as she looked into Jason's eyes, filled with a mix of anger and desperation, she felt a sense of dread she couldn't quite place. She finally whispered, "I need time, Jason. Please, just give me some time." Jason nodded slowly, but Emma could see the storm brewing behind his calm facade. "I'll give you time, Emma, but not much. You need to decide what you want." With that, he turned and walked away, leaving Emma standing in the cold night air, shivering not just from the chill, but from the fear of what might happen next. It was 5:30 p.m. on a frigid January evening when Emma Walters made her way to the cabin. She had lied to her husband, Mark, telling him she was heading to the store for a few last-minute groceries. She could feel her heart racing as she turned onto the secluded, snow-covered road that led to the small wooden structure hidden in the woods. Jason was already there, pacing back and forth outside, his breath visible in the cold air. As soon as she stepped out of her car, he was on her. "Did you do it?" Jason demanded, his voice raw and urgent. "Did you tell him?" Emma looked away, wrapping her arms around herself, shivering from more than just the cold. "No, Jason, I couldn't. I just need more time." "More time?" He spat, his face contorted with frustration. "You've been saying that for weeks. I've had enough, Emma. I'm not going to be your dirty little secret forever." He stepped closer, and Emma instinctively took a step back, bumping into the car. "Jason, please, we can figure this out. Just not like this." Jason's eyes darkened. "Not like this." He gestured wildly, his hand knocking the side mirror. "How then, Emma? You want me to just keep pretending everything's fine? Because I'm done pretending." Emma's stomach twisted with fear. She had never seen him like this. His usual charm replaced with something desperate and dangerous. "Let's go inside," she whispered, glancing around as if the trees themselves could be witnesses to their confrontation. Reluctantly, Jason followed her into the cabin. The silence inside was deafening, broken only by the creaking of the wooden floor beneath their feet. Emma turned to face him, trying to stay calm despite the panic rising in her chest. "I'm going to talk to Mark," she said, her voice trembling. "I just need to find the right moment. But I can't do it like this, with you pressuring me." Jason's eyes narrowed. "Pressuring you? You're the one who dragged me into this mess, Emma. I left everything behind for you, and now you're trying to back out?" Emma's eyes darted to the kitchen, where a set of knives gleamed on the counter. She swallowed hard, forcing herself to stay focused. "I'm not backing out. I just need time." Jason's face twisted with rage. Time for what? To come up with more excuses? Emma opened her mouth to speak, but before she could utter a word, Jason crossed the room in 2 quick strides and grabbed her by the shoulder. "You think you can keep playing me like this?" His grip was painfully tight, his eyes wild with a fury she had never seen before. She tried to pull away, but he shoved her against the wall, the impact knocking the breath out of her. "Jason, stop!" she gasped, her voice barely a whisper. But he wasn't listening. In a blur of motion, he turned and grabbed one of the knives from the counter. Emma's heart stopped as she saw the blade gleaming in his hand. "Jason, please, don't do this," she begged, her voice cracking with fear. He pointed the knife at her, his hand shaking. "You think you can just walk away after everything we've been through?" Emma shook her head frantically, tears streaming down her face. "No, I don't want to walk away. But Jason wasn't hearing her anymore. The anger and betrayal in his eyes had taken over, and he was beyond reason. In one swift movement, he lunged at her, and Emma screamed as she felt the blade slice through her arm. She stumbled backward, clutching the wound, her vision blurring with pain and terror. Jason stood there, panting, the knife still in his hand, his eyes wide with shock at what he had done. "Oh my God," he whispered, his voice hoarse. "Emma, I didn't mean to," but it was too late. The pain and fear drove Emma into a frenzy. She grabbed a glass vase from the table beside her and swung it at him with all her strength. The vase shattered against his head, sending shards of glass flying through the air. Jason staggered back, blood trickling down the side of his face. But he didn't fall. Instead, he roared in fury and came at her again, the knife raised high. Emma barely managed to dodge the attack, her mind racing with panic. She needed to get out, to escape before this went any further. But as she turned to run, she slipped on the wet floor, her feet sliding out from under her. She hit the ground hard, pain exploding through her body. Jason was on her in an instant, pinning her down, the knife pressing against her throat. Emma gasped, her heart pounding so loudly she could barely hear his ragged breathing above her. "You're not going anywhere," he hissed, his face inches from hers. "You're mine, Emma. You promised me." Mind raced, searching for something, anything that could save her. Her hand brushed against a shard of the broken vase, and she grabbed it, barely feeling the sharp edges cutting into her palm. With a scream of desperation, she drove the shard into Jason's side. He cried out, his body jerking in pain, and the knife clattered to the floor. Emma pushed him off her, scrambling to her feet, her breath coming in sobs. Jason lay on the floor, blood spreading across his shirt, his eyes wide with shock and pain. Emma stumbled back, her hands shaking, the room spinning around her. "Jason, she began, but the words died in her throat as she watched him struggle to breathe, his eyes glazing over. And then, just like that, it was over. Jason Collins was dead. Emma stood there, frozen, staring at Jason's lifeless body, sprawled across the wooden floor. The silence was deafening, the weight of what she had done crushing down on her. Blood was everywhere, on her hands, on the floor, seeping into the cracks of the old cabin. She knew she had to do something, but her mind was blank, paralyzed by fear and shock. The next few minutes were a blur. She knelt beside Jason, desperately checking for any sign of life. His chest was still, his eyes open and vacant. The shard of glass was embedded deep in his side, blood pooling around it. He was gone. Emma's breath came in short, panicked gasps as she staggered back, her thoughts racing. What was she going to do? Call the police? Tell them it was self-defense? But the affair would come out, and everything she had tried so hard to protect would be destroyed. She'd lose her family, her children, everything. She glanced around the cabin, her heart hammering in her chest. She needed to think, needed to get out of there before someone saw her car. Frantically, she looked at the clock on the wall, 6:15 p.m. She had to move fast. She grabbed her phone, her hands shaking as she fumbled with it. No signal. Of course, they were too far from town. She glanced at Jason's phone lying on the floor, but she couldn't bring herself to touch it. Instead, she made a decision she would later regret. She needed to cover this up. Emma moved quickly, her mind detached from the horror of what she was doing. She wiped down the door handles, the knife, anything she might have touched. She couldn't think straight, but she knew she couldn't leave any evidence behind. Her eyes fell on Jason's car, parked just outside the cabin. Panic flared in her chest. What if someone saw it here? Her mind raced as she dragged his body, her muscles straining with the effort towards the back door. She was terrified someone would show up, but the woods were quiet, the snow muffling any sound. She managed to get him into the trunk of his car, her whole body trembling with exhaustion and fear. The drive to the nearby river was agonizingly slow, every minute feeling like an eternity. She parked on a deserted stretch of road, her hands slick with sweat as she pulled Jason's lifeless body from the trunk. The water was dark, reflecting the cold, starless sky. She pushed his body towards the edge, her breath visible in the frigid air. He slid into the water with a sickening splash, the current slowly carrying him away. For a moment, Emma just stood there, staring at the spot where Jason had disappeared. Her mind was numb, her heart pounding in her ears. She felt like she was in a nightmare she couldn't wake up from, but she knew she couldn't stay. She had to get back before anyone noticed she was gone. The drive back to the cabin was a blur. She parked Jason's car behind the trees, hiding it from the road. Then she got into her own car and drove home, her mind spinning with 1,000 frantic thoughts. What would she tell Mark? How could she ever explain this? When she finally stepped into her house, Mark was in the kitchen, oblivious to the horror she had just lived through. "Hey, everything okay?" he asked, his voice casual, unaware of the blood still staining her shirt, hidden beneath her coat. Emma nodded numbly. Yeah, just needed some air. She barely slept that night, her mind replaying the events over and over, each moment a fresh wave of terror. She kept expecting the police to show up to take her away, but the hours passed in suffocating silence. The next morning, the news broke. Jason Collins's body had been found by a jogger early that morning, washed up on the banks of the river. The initial reports speculated it was an accident, maybe a drunken fall. Emma felt a twisted mix of relief and guilt, knowing the truth would destroy her life. Days turned into weeks, and the investigation dragged on. Emma lived in constant fear, jumping at every knock on the door, every unexpected phone call. But as time passed, it seemed like she had gotten away with it. The police couldn't find any evidence linking her to Jason's death, and his family believed he had just gone out for a drive and never returned. But Emma knew the truth. Every day, the weight of what she had done grew heavier, the guilt eating away at her. She had killed the man she once loved. And for what? To protect a lie? She couldn't keep up the charade forever. It was only a matter of time before the walls closed in. And they did, 4 months later, when the police knocked on her door with a warrant. They had found trace evidence in Jason's car, a strand of her hair, too small to be noticed, but enough to connect her to the scene. The case that had been going cold was now wide open again, and Emma was the prime suspect. As she was led away in handcuffs, the neighbors watching in shock, Emma finally realized the truth. There was no escaping the consequences of what she had done. She had tried to cover up her crime, to bury it like Jason's body in the river, but the truth had a way of coming back, no matter how deep you tried to hide it.